Hey there, hi there, ho there, boys and girls. James J. Patterson here, coming to you live from the reading room at Squire Publishing, a small press with big ideas. I always hesitate for a moment when this thing's starting. I never know if it's going to work. But I've been looking forward to today because I'm going to read a snippet from one of my favorite books. And uh, before I do, I should mention that at Squire Publishing, all those half-price sales are gone. And thank you for participating, those of you that took advantage of those. Uh, and but we got a new deal for you: 25% off books that we read from Alan Squire on these little broadcasts. That's not bad, is it? We'll pick up the postage and we'll take them to the post office for you. Okay. As part of Alan Squire, a lot of manuscripts come through, and usually they've been vetted before they get to me, but because I read slow, and uh, and I like to keep it that way. But there's one literary magazine I really love, and it's called the Times Literary Supplement. Comes every week, and it's loaded with great reviews, and they're not really kowtowing to the mainstream book selling media. These guys are just terrific. Are just terrific reviewers. So they monitor the university presses and the small presses and large alike. They're mainly uh, interested in literature, which is what you want. Anyway, Maxwell, good to see you. Uh, and so I'm reading through there not long ago, and I come across this statistics: 20% of people who buy fiction are men. 20%. That means 20 out of 100 people are men and they read fiction. That means 80% are not men. And I was thinking, what happened? What's the matter with guys? When I was in college, men were really, wanted to be part of it, and they really loved it. Anyway, 20%. Uh, I'm thinking, well, what are they doing? I guess they're reading. Those who do read are reading nonfiction, and they get the idea what that they have to read fact-based stuff that'll help them get ahead in the world or something like that. Fiction helps you get ahead in the world. It gives you perspective. It engages the soul. Try a little of that once in a while. Anyway, 20% of men. I can't get over it. So that made me think, in the last couple of years, I've read some great novels by women, contemporary, and some of those novels have secret information that men need if they want to get along with the other gender, and they ought to take a look at it and they see themselves reflected, and sometimes in a more positive light than they might think. So anyway, I'm going to recommend a few books, and in the coming months, if I keep doing this, I don't get fed up. I'm going to read from some of these, and I'm not going to editorialize or any of that. I'm just going to say, hey, this is something you need. And one of them is my wife's book. Yes, it's my wife's book, and it's called A Secret Woman. And I know the men who have read this book fall madly in love with Louise Terry, the main character. She's independent. She's an artist. She's self-supporting, and she parties hard. She works hard. She fights hard. She's rolls her sleeves up and she gets into it. And she's got a mystery to solve, and she does. And it's fantastic. It's a great book. But it says woman in the title, and it's by a woman. So do guys immediately say, this is chicklet? I don't get people. Anyway, another book I'm going to read from in the coming weeks is Silver Girl. Again, a female name in the title, and then by a woman. I guess guys are going to run from that. But Leslie Petrick has written an incredible book, and the lead character in this book, never tells anybody her name. She's from a poor side of town, from a small Iowa city, and she's worked her way into the big university in Chicago, and uh, uh, and she's dazzling. She has to connive and scrape to get by, while all the other women in the dorm are wealthy, and she's got to have two jobs and go to school, and And she's really something. I'd like to say, when I was reading this, I thought she's kind of like a female Holden Caulfield, you know? Holden Caulfield would have liked having a girlfriend who didn't tell anybody her name. And so I found this to be intriguing. I gave it to 10 people for Christmas, and I know 2 of them who read it. But I'll be reading from that in the coming weeks as well. And I talked to Leslie recently, and she says it's okay. Another book I'm going to read from in the coming weeks is by Branka Kubrila. She lives in Australia, and she's from Eastern Europe. And this book is harrowing. It takes place in the 1990s. 2 young, attractive women are graduating from high school, just as a massive, horrible civil war is breaking out in Serbia, Yugoslavia area. And they both have completely different characters. And how they handle that and how they get the hell out of there is harrowing and unbelievable. And I don't know a guy that wouldn't like this book. So I'm going to beat them over the head with it. But I'll be reading a little bit from that in the coming weeks as well. All right, on to today's project. Alan Squire published, I don't always read Alan Squire product when I get on here because, life's short and there's a lot of great stuff in the world. But I do like to give the home team a bump once in a while. And so today's book is this beautiful thing, Melanie's Song. And I just think that's gorgeous. I like that cover. God, kills me dead. This book is carries over from a book that Joanna Biggar wrote 10 years ago called That Paris Year. You don't have to read one to enjoy the other. As a matter of fact, I would recommend you read Melanie's Song before you read That Paris Year, only because your curiosity will be off the charts by the time you get to the end of this. But That Paris Year is a big fat novel about 5 young women who their college burns down in Southern California, and they decide to spend their junior year at the Sorbonne in Paris. Now, 5 good-looking, intelligent college girls from the LA area going to spend a year in Paris in 1962, 63. What could go wrong? Well, it's a great read. And Melanie's Song happens 12 years later when the women have all been back from Paris and they get on with their lives. Everybody kind of disperses after school. Some try to stay in touch. Well, one of them becomes a movie star, entertainer, and world famous, all that. Another one becomes a nun. Goes off to Africa and becomes a nun. Another one becomes a journalist. And another one goes missing. And so the journalist has decided she's been charged to write a follow-up. What happened to those 5 damsels that went off to Paris, and where are they today? Well, she uses that commission as a journalist to secretly try to hunt down and find what happened to Melanie. And it's a descending scale of suspense and fear that compounds itself with each new revelation. I don't read a lot of genre fiction. As a matter of fact, I have it thrust upon me. But I wouldn't call this a mystery so much as it's just a suspense. It just gets darker and darker as it goes along, and the writing is fabulous. One thing that all these books have that I'm recommending to my male friends who will never read them is the prose is strong, confident, elegant, and sassy. These women get men, and they don't have a bone to pick. And they've got a few issues, but they get men, and they like men, and they'd like to like them better if men would let them. We'll give them a reason to. Anyway, I think that men seeing themselves reflected in some of these novels would be helpful to the culture at large, and that's as far as I'm going with that. Anyway, so historical fiction. Is it historical fiction if it happened during your lifetime? That's a good question. Melanie's Song takes place between 69 and maybe 74, 5. And those were the years that I came of age and matured. And and when I read this, it's like going back in time. All of a sudden, it all comes flooding back. All that awful stuff, Nixon and all that stuff, but some of the beautiful stuff too. The hippies were kind of cool, and I'm going to be loyal forever. And but uh, so a lot of this comes out in this. It really does teleport you back like any good historical novel should. You're now in and of that time, and it's just fabulous. So let's get going. Um, and a lot of the unresolved issues that we're suffering through now in America per se, and maybe the world, are a lot of unresolved things from that era that didn't get resolved. Just because the Vietnam War ended didn't mean that all those things that contributed to it weren't still in place. And we're finding out the hard way. You need a little closure once in a while, huh? All right, let's do this thing. I'm going to give you a little bit of chapter 1, and then we're going to hop through the book kind of quickly. The lead character in the book is named JJ, and she's the one that became a journalist. And she's the one who's just now set off on this trail to go find Melanie. All these gals were a tight, bonded group, and so it's this quest. Okay? And before I do that, I want to take a look around. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm ready. JJ drew in a deep breath, ready to give herself up to the sun. Sea breeze blowing through the open car window whipped strands of dark hair across her face. Below the turnout along the coast road, rocky cliffs disappeared into a tumult of white waves. The ocean stretched endlessly in symphonies of blue. The gulls rode crests of air past islands of seaweed, searching for life beneath. Closing her eyes for a moment, she could still see the colors, the contours of the sea. The gulls cried out, while the pounding and receding waves thrummed like her pulse. Calm down, she told herself, trying to let the beauty around her erase the fright that had just made her heart pound, willing the lingering smell of smoke from the remains of the high diddle house to clear from her nostrils. She tasted the salt air even before it made a delicious crust on her skin and relaxed a little. The California coast was her native place, imprinted on her since before she could walk. And she felt that imprint even hundreds of miles north of her childhood beaches. No matter what she discovered about Melanie, she could cope. As her breathing returned to normal, she pulled down the visor to stare at the sea and caught a glimpse of herself in the vanity mirror. Damn, she said aloud. Her dark blue eyes rested on smudged half circles like wayward moons, and her black brows seemed to point at the small crinkles that had crept in at the corners, appearing overnight like fault lines. This babe sure looks older than 32, she thought, wondering at the loss of the child she had been, then snapped the visor shut. The old question started up again. What am I thinking anyway? Why am I doing this? Like the last decade, and the nagging restlessness that had driven her, drove her still to seek that maddening, elusive thing, a kind of truth. It was the same force that had sent her from poetry and its eternal questions to journalism and its fact-based resolutions. Answers, that's what she wanted, and now more than ever. And I love that. Now more than ever was Nixon's re-election campaign slogan. And those little asides are all through here. If you don't know what they are, it doesn't matter. But now more than ever, when I read that, I went, ah! Okay. Answers, that's what she wanted, now more than ever. For the last 2 years, the quest for stories of her oldest, truest friends, the ones she'd journeyed to Paris with a dozen years before, in 1962, a lifetime ago, had kept her going. That was also when she realized she'd lost track of Melanie. Now, going over what had just happened, she was hell-bent to find her. Hope somebody does that if it ever happens to you. How she learned from Ivan that Mellie had almost certainly been seen nearby not long ago at a small commune, High Diddle House. How she'd left L.A. for a long weekend to see what she could find out. How she'd followed Ivan's hand-drawn map with an arrow pointing deep into the redwood forest. As her small Datsun headed up the coastal highway and she glimpsed the shimmering endless sea to the left, Her spirits had lifted, and finally, turning inland to follow a winding road along the tumbling little river, where the sunlight fell in strands of gold through the towering giant redwoods, she'd felt ready to succumb to magic. Then there was that first rough hand-painted sign saying "High Diddle," with an arrow pointing to a narrow, twisty road, and the first jittery sense of foreboding had set in, the worry that she was treading a path where she ought not to go. She remembered the packet of Melanie's letters and journals carefully tucked in her bag. Didn't Melanie almost invite me here? For JJ, the note on the top of the journals intriguingly said, "In Melanie's neat hand." As Ivan's map instructed, she'd driven the requisite 5.3 miles, then slowed to find the dirt road that veered off to the right, leading to High Diddle House. Less than a mile into the forest, the redwoods nearly closed ranks at the top, creating a roof over this small piece of the world, and large ferns graced both sides of the path, seeming to wave her on. Soon she saw the crooked wooden sign with a faded day-glow paint nailed to a tree. High Diddle House. All peaceniks welcome. The road widened slightly beneath the sign. A sign for me, she decided. Time to get out and walk. Standing by the car door a moment, letting her eyes adjust to the deep forest light, she walked slowly around the bend. 100 yards ahead, the ghost buildings appeared, and she'd frozen in place. For a long minute, her feet had refused to move further. What had been the High Diddle House was now the charred remains of a good-sized building, its roof and most walls gone, its foundation blackened. The debris from smaller buildings on burnt foundations was scattered beyond the clearing and into the forest. So she goes to this commune looking for her friend, and she realizes the commune has burnt to the ground. And she later learns that there was a body of a young woman found in there, all charred and dead and cooked. And something tells her it isn't Melanie. She's got to dig a little deeper. Huh? So now we jump ahead a little bit, and she's going around and doing the journalist / detective thing, and she's interviewing people and comparing notes. So she decided to find Melanie's parents, and they live in a mansion in LA, and they're rich people. JJ pulled into the circular drive of the Hart's faux plantation-style house in the shadow of the graceful Colorado Street Bridge that crossed the Arroyo near the Rose Bowl. Suicide Bridge, some called it. JJ remembered the Harts well, cold, superior, often cutting in their remarks, way too well dressed, especially Mrs. Hart. As for Dr. Hart, he'd rather hang in the background like a gray cloud. JJ, how delightful to see you. Mrs. Hart's tone was well-polished warmth. It's been too long. Sit, please. Just make yourself comfortable. Adele will bring some tea. JJ sat, running through her options of how to play this. Old friend, casual interviewer to garner a few facts for a local paper, investigating journalist. Yes, it has been a long time, and I appreciate your agreeing to see me. I was hoping, too, I might be able to see Dr. Hart. Will he be able to join us? While talking, JJ also pulled out a tape recorder and announced, I'd just like to have this on for backup to make sure I'm accurate, if you don't mind. Claire Hart seemed to pay no attention. I guess it's been some time since we heard from Melanie's husband. She brightened and turned her smile on JJ. He seemed to have done quite well for himself with that symphony he wrote, based on Melanie, don't you know? Whatever that means. But my, the reviews have been quite excellent, haven't they? Even all the way out here. So what about Melanie? When were you last in touch with her? That's what we were hoping to learn from you, JJ. A man's voice intervened. She looked up, startled, to realize that Charles Hart had slipped into the room and stood in the corner opposite his wife, a stealthy presence in a gray suit. Dr. Hart, JJ nodded and started to rise, but he waved her back into her chair. We don't do press, he said, filling the room like a dark cloud. Never, except, of course, for charity purposes. JJ's interior file cabinet suddenly flipped through all the society clips she remembered of them, many shown to her by Melanie. Well, she responded, in that regard, I guess I wear two hats, press, but also friend. As you know, is my dear friend. JJ swallowed, trying not to let her fears about the fire at the Haydiddle intervene now. It's just like very, it's just I'd like very much to get in touch with her. JJ observed both hearts carefully to see their reactions. Claire stared at the window vacantly, trying to mask a wave of sadness, while Charles's eyes bored down at her, turning the color of stainless steel. Yes, so would we. You must realize, and please understand, that this conversation is strictly off the record, as you say, and any attempt to breach that accord would be a game, if not a career changer. I'm sure you grasp my meaning. So if you must know, we don't know where she is. He paused long enough to see if JJ registered the threat. If so, she gave no sign of it. Thank God she survived the year of living on her own in Paris without going off the rails. I was very opposed to that uproarious caper you all pulled. And for the record, whoever put that idea into her head is really the one responsible for this mess. Radicals, dissidents, drinking, free love, to say nothing of those crazy French intellectuals. He paused to give in to a moment's shudder. Some girls, I suppose, are sophisticated and strong-willed enough to survive such an assault without permanent damage, but Melody was fragile, easily influenced, and if you have to know, she never really came back to us, not as the agreeable child we had raised, not as a member of this family. We should never have agreed to that French nonsense, wouldn't have either, but it seemed the only way at the time, and to get her away from that Moonlight Sonata lover boy whose parents speak German, for God's sake. Well, they did end up getting married, you know, his wife interrupted. Yes, Claire, I know they did, without the courtesy of even informing us, of course, without so much. Well, you did tell them you never wanted to see him again, dear, and her either, if she was still attached to him. For God's sake, Claire, this is hardly the time to get into all that ancient history. Charles rolled his right hand into a fist and tapped it rhythmically into his left palm. The point is that surprisingly, even that ill-conceived match seemed to be going well enough. But after a few years, she really did begin to go off the rails. Seriously, got into all this political ballyhoo, ran off to see music festivals mixed with radicals and all that sort, and left the poor old boy rather out in the cold, I gather. And well, despite of all our efforts, she just cut us off. We haven't heard from her. We haven't heard from her but he did do rather well for himself after all, don't you know? Claire cut in. Who? Charles snapped. Why, Hans, our son-in-law. He's turning out to be one quite prominent in music circles. Charles, I've read it in all the papers. Her husband waved her away with an unfisted hand. So that's why we agreed to see you, JJ. Since you snoop for a living, we thought maybe you had some information you could share with us. Well, JJ answered, setting her pen down, and while she looked up into Charles Hart's eyes, seeing if she could penetrate them. That's why I'm conducting interviews with everyone I can who knew or knows her. I'm trying to find out where she is. I haven't actually seen her for years, but she did keep in touch with me through those Rochester days, and then just sporadically after that, a postcard here or there. You let us know when you find her, won't you? Claire's vacant blue eyes seemed filled now with something, maybe the remnants of life. What we'd just like is for her to come home. A strand of perfect blonde hair fell away willfully from her chignon, and her lip quivered silently. If I find her, I'll certainly be in touch, JJ answered, then turned to Charles, who still stood in the center of the light-filled lanai like a statue in the park. But I'd like to ask you what you were doing in Mendocino lately, or rather why I was informed you went up to halt an investigation into remains supposedly found in that unfortunate fire last fall on the Haydiddle property, off the road from Little River. My God, you are a snoop, aren't you? The worst sort, Charles said, his steely face turned white as he at last dropped into a cushioned wicker chair. If you got that far, then you must know that, well, there were rumors that someone resembling Melanie was found in that godforsaken rat hole. And then, when the thing burned down, rumors went around that a body he halted a moment to inhale, was found, or the remains of one. A young woman, they said. He looked up at JJ now. Well, in our position, we have to be very careful of rumors. They can be ruinous, you know. And we simply needed to put an end to them. Whoever that unfortunate soul was. It was not our Melanie. Oh no, not our Melanie, Claire added. Gunning the car in reverse, JJ felt her head swimming. Shit, JJ said to herself. In, Instead of finding cooperation, she had stepped into a new front in an escalating war on the truth. Well, it turns out her parents have had a fake funeral for the girl, which is creepy in every way. It was early evening when JJ found a parking space on Sunset Boulevard near Muzo and Frank's, the family restaurant Madge and Bert, sometimes accompanied by Jocelyn and herself, used to dine in every night. She blinked, stepping in from the light to the dark of the bar to find Jocelyn at a corner table, her blonde hair falling over her face, leaning forward as if reading. She did not look up. JJ hesitated a minute before trying to break the ice. Well, I guess I'm the one making the dramatic entry for a change. Jocelyn looked up at her old friend for a moment, then offered a faint smile. Neither extended a hand, and JJ sat abruptly on the chair across from the banquette. Well, JJ began, but was interrupted by Jocelyn. Thanks for coming all this way, she said. It's the least I can do for Melly. Taking notice of Jocelyn's juice, she summoned the waiter. I'll take a gin and tonic, please. I'm drinking for both of us. Jocelyn smiled again, twisted her napkin around the juice glass, and stared at it, as though it contained the secrets of the monologue she was about to commence. So, the last time I saw her was at that big 4th of July thing in 1970, Honor America Day, sponsored by Bob Hope. He asked me personally because I'd done a couple of shows with him earlier to entertain the troops. Did you know? Jocelyn looked up. JJ saw her friend's eyes change color, green to gold, as they always had. A tiger, she thought. Yes, I knew. How'd you get into that, anyway? My people, well, mostly Harding, my main publicity guy, thought it would be good for my image. Yeah? JJ controlled her impulse to interrogate. Yeah, well, Jocelyn looked back at the glass. I mean, there was a niche there to fill. The hot Hollywood babe who was not a dissenter. You mean like the un-Jane Fonda? Exactly. I mean, well, we were filming Walk on the Woman's Side, and he thought, we could reach a larger audience of women, housewives and all, if I had a more mainstream image. So I did the USO shows, and that went well. And then Bob Hope called, and I went to Washington. JJ took a long swig of her drink, swallowing her impulse to ask what in the hell that had been like. And you saw Melly at that event? She asked, remembering Melly's postcard saying the opposite. Yes, I saw her. She came because I was there. I know it. She must have seen the ads for it on TV, but I definitely saw her. She was right there down in front, wearing all black. Can you imagine? Holding a sign. It said in big letters, Pourquoi me tuez-vous? And all around the edges were images from the war, some drawings, some photos, huts being burned, children bombed and bleeding. Why do you kill me? JJ translated. Words of Christ? No, Jocelyn answered quietly. Pascal, by echoing Christ. But echoing Christ. That was what she was getting at. That I had crossed over to the other side. That by supporting this God Bless America event, by supporting the troops, I was also contributing to the killing. Do you think she was right? Jocelyn stared straight at JJ. Then her eyes shifting from green to gray. Yes, of course she was right. That's why I couldn't acknowledge her. It was too... Why didn't you ever tell me any of this? Dear God, she replied, tears spilling down her cheeks. I couldn't. That image of her standing there silently with that sign has haunted me ever since, made me see what my life had become, a lie, hiding inside a publicity poster, a fake woman hiding inside the persona of an invented one. She was saying to me with her presence, Jocelyn, you've sold out. Where is the real you? How could I tell you? I was so ashamed. They shared all they knew about Melanie, then lapsed into silence. Jocelyn finally spoke. This is an amazing story, a mystery, JJ, from what I saw and what some of the others have said. We know Mellie became very political, an activist really, and all those strange encounters you had with her family, no wonder she split. Then the commune thing, the drugs, the husband, Hans. Good, attentive husband? Complete jerk? Eccentric, talented composer? All of the above? And God, where is she? I want to think she's alive somewhere. JJ sighed, not wanting to admit her own gut feeling that Melanie had perished in the fire. October had blown in, taking the smog with it. Good stuff. Good stuff. Now who's here? Come on, knock on my door. Lorena! Oh, how you doing, kid? Uh-huh. Hey, it's JB. How you doing, Joanna? Did I do okay? I love that book, JB. Randy, standard. Randy's here. Randy, he's the guy who designed this. Say hi to him. He's sitting right there. Anyway, that's me. Half quarter price, 25% off. Melanie's Song, and that appears here. If you get on over to Squire Publishing and pick them up, I recommend reading Melanie first because it'll stoke the fire. It's really good, and then you'll tackle that Parasier and you'll have yourself a great summer of reading. And I don't know. I think I'm out of gas. And that's it. I'll be back next week. Now I'm going to read from some of these women's books, not every week. I don't know what I'm going to do next week, but that's it for now. So thanks for checking in. It means a lot. And God love you. Hang in there. Albert Williams. Good to see you. Bye-bye.